right, everyone, welcome to today's Industry and Campus webinar, how California Polytechnic State University centralized IT to provide a modern software hub for students. This is Jody Tracy, Online Event Production Manager with EDUCAUSE, and I'll be your moderator for today's event. EDUCAUSE is pleased to welcome today's speaker, Allison Robinson, Associate Vice President at California Polytechnic State University, San Luis Obispo, and she'll introduce herself here in a moment. But first, let me give you a brief orientation on our session's learning environment. If you're tweeting, please use the hashtag EDUCAUSE webinar. We do hope that you'll join us in making this session interactive. Thanks for using the chat here to let us know where you're from. Just another reminder that to send a message to everybody in the chat, just make sure you have it defaulted to everyone so we can all see your questions and comments. Make sure you put your questions and comments in the chat. Whenever they come to you, we'll be answering questions throughout today's presentation. If you have any technical issues, please direct a private message by selecting panelists and hosts in the chat dropdown. And today's slides and recording will be archived today on the EDUCAUSE website for later viewing. And now let's turn to today's presentation. California Polytechnic State University had an ambitious strategy to centralize all university IT to provide the best possible service for students. The COVID-19 pandemic highlighted a number of emerging challenges and expectations from a new generation of students. Frankly speaking, they described old methods of software delivery as a dumpster fire, and they knew they needed to work fast. Working with AppsAnywhere, CPSU created the Cal Poly Software Hub, an online store-style platform that gives Cal Poly students, faculty, and staff access to software that is currently available for academic use. This software not only helped centralize IT, but also offered an incredible amount of flexibility to students and faculty alike. Thanks for joining us here today. With that, I'm going to turn it over to Jennifer from AppsAnywhere.
Thank you, Jody. Thank you all for being here. We really appreciate your attendance today. And again, I just want to reiterate, we have someone monitoring the chat, and we're going to weave questions throughout our discussion today. So the format that Allison and I have come up with is sort of mirrors how this all came to be in the first place. Allison and I have had a couple of lengthy conversations about how Cal Poly has created a modern IT experience on campus for students, faculty, and staff. And so we decided that this would be an interesting way, kind of mirroring some of the conversations and Q&A that we've done in the past to share how they have developed this software hub to really centralize software delivery for students. So I'm going to hand this over to Allison Robinson, who is the Associate Vice President of and WCIO at Cal Poly San Luis Obispo. And welcome today, and thank you for being here.
Thank you. So, just a little bit about my background. I've been at Cal Poly now for about 5 years. Previous to that, I was at the University of Maryland in College Park. And before that, I was at the University of South Florida in Tampa. And of course, we have to go north. I was at the University of Wisconsin, Milwaukee. And Wisconsin is where I'm really originally from, so you'll hear it in my O's. But I am actually a certified teacher. I was 1.8 General Ed, 512 Computer Science. Went on for my master's degree in computer science. And at that time, anybody who could do something with computers kind of got pulled into running technology for schools more than teaching technology. So I spent about 3 years in K-12, and then the rest of my career has been with higher education, with one brief stint as a consultant, which was a very different but enjoyable experience as well. So in terms of what we're talking about today, I've done centralization in 3 institutions. I've centralized twice. I've created service organization or modernized the organization twice, and I've moved to AWS twice. Cal Poly happens to be the one place I've done all 3 things. So that's given me, I've practiced other, and I say I've perfected at Cal Poly.
Thanks, Allison. That's awesome. So can you start by maybe setting the stage a little bit about Cal Poly? I think, everyone has heard of it, but maybe give us a little bit of information about student demographic, et cetera. We know it's a beautiful location, but maybe a little bit more about the school itself. That'd be helpful.
Sure, sure. So Cal Poly is in San Luis Obispo, California. I know when I have family come visit, they expect LA or San Francisco. We're almost exactly halfway between the two of them, and we're nothing like that. The campus itself has 22,000 students. We're a large campus. We have about 9,000 acres. They aren't all right on the campus itself, but we have a couple of ranches that really kind of expand that out. We're about 10 miles off the coast. It's a very outdoor active campus, from hiking to water. We have 22,000 students. It's quite competitive. We're a polytechnic, so our pedagogy depends a lot on software and technology. We have a mantra of learn by doing. All of our seniors actually have a senior project where they demonstrate something they've learned. It actually is something great they can use to go into job interviews with. And it turns out 95% of our graduates are employed or in graduate school within 9 months of graduation. So it's a great place to learn and live. And we have, in terms of sports teams, we have what you would expect, but we also have beach volleyball and a surf club. And we also have a great rodeo team. So it's just a wide variety of things that happen on campus. Neat place.
Yeah, it is. It's a beautiful place. And you have some agriculture too, some pigs and whatnot. So I've seen that.
Wine and viticulture. We're a wine. We used to say up and coming, but we've arrived. It's a wine area now.
It absolutely is. So when we spoke, you mentioned that the campus had an initiative to modernize. When did you begin to move towards this centralizing modern IT? When did that all start?
So I was presenting in Washington, D.C. on what I was doing at Maryland around modernizing the organization. And Cal Poly was there to announce that they were all in the data center at AWS. The president and the CIO made that presentation, and we ended up actually connecting there. And like magic, I'm in San Luis Obispo a year and some later. And so I'm going to share with you a slide that I have here. This is what I shared with the staff at an all hands, saying, not only are we moving to Amazon was just a piece of the puzzle, right? What we were going to do is become a service organization in a DevOps culture. And it's like, that's what, but how? So through these four things, moving it to the data center to AWS, implementing, I call the Atlassian suite is what was selected to meet our needs. And I call that our ERP for IT. It holds our processes, it holds our data. It's the place where the customer engages with us. I call it the front door to service. We were going to restructure ourselves from a plan, from technical function to a plan, build, run structure where you go from idea to service. They say shift right to put this into your operational group. And then a student employee program was going to be part of that as well. Let me go ahead and advance this. So essentially our organization looked like this. We had our technical areas, and each area would plan their work and then they engineer their work, and then they'd operate it once it went into operations. The limiting here, though, is the more you put into operations, the more you shrink from what you can plan and build. Now, this just isn't Cal Poly. This is the history of IT organizations. We all came from here. And so when they talk about doing more with less, those days were way gone, really, especially with this structure. So we had to think about taking that and turning it on its side. So in a plan, build, run organization, it became a service strategy, the engineering, and then operations, right? We plan the work that we do. When it was fully planned, it went into engineering, they built it. When it was ready, we had a gate between engineering and operations where they would review the work. Was it documented in a run book? We've all struggled with that person who knew all that information, then they retired and all of it goes with them. So before we accepted any new service into operations, it needed to be in a run book so that we could be successful running a good chance we'd be successful running the service independent of the person being there or not. You got to take a vacation. Sometimes you don't feel well. We needed this stuff documented. So that became part of service delivery. Was it in the knowledge base? Was it in the service catalog? Was it posted in this place where we could get software? Was something you needed to download? Was the help desk trained? Were there facts written if that was relevant to it? And so it would go through this review process and operations and say, we are ready to support it and pull it in. So it really was a shift in how we worked, and we became very focused not on the technologies we ran, but the services we provided. You go ahead and stop that screen share. And that was comprehensively what we were talking about when we said we were going to modernize our IT organization.
And you talk a lot about service. So I'm just curious, like, who do you serve? Who's your customer? And also, can you kind of describe that front door to service and what that means?
Okay. Yeah, no, that's a great question. You actually almost verbatim said the question that I asked of the staff. This is on the EDUCAUSE site. There's something there about the 5 questions about service. And so this is service strategy. The number 1 question is the most strategic. Who do you serve and what are they trying to accomplish? Now, when someone new shows up, everybody jumps to the 5th question in that list. And that 5th question is, how are we organized to provide those services, right? They're like, oh, new AVP, another reorg. And I said, no, that's not what's going to happen here. Until we are clear on who we are serving and what they're trying to accomplish, and how do we deliver those services? How do we know we're doing a good job? This kind of goes through these questions. Until we understand that, we're not reorganizing. And in my more candid moments, I'm like, it's futile. You just shouldn't do it. So we took the time to go through and ask ourselves, what services do we provide? Now, I usually don't give a lot of context around this exercise so that people go out and we have a dialogue about what they come back with. But when they come back with it, I'll see things like Linux. And we don't actually, you can't get a Linux server for us. Linux is a tool we use to provide other services. So I equate it to maybe a menu in a restaurant, right? You know, there's a spatula, a stove, herbs and spices and green onions. And those things are used to bring out the items that are on the menu, but you don't get to order a spatula, right? So we had to talk about the tools we use to provide services versus the actual service themselves. And then I said, when we can service that and be clear on what the service is and what we do in that service, right? So we need to be very, very clear, who can access this, what does it do, so that people understand if it will fit into what they're trying to accomplish. The service catalog becomes the place where we list our services. Now, we had to go through this exercise because our webpage was very much structured by the technical organization. So each application development owned their section of the website, and the network people did. And so we understood well where it was, but if you didn't understand our org structure or know people, it was very, very hard to find that. So we also kicked off an effort to redo our website. And I actually made the person, no one technical, it was our communications person. I said, you are responsible for this. You represent the customer. Everything needs to be in the voice of the customer. And I told everyone, Amy was her name. If she says this isn't understandable, it's not understandable. We've got to keep writing, right? So we connected our service catalog. Our service catalog, we connected in our knowledge base articles. And we kept those things all together in tech.calpoly.edu. So our front door to services, I don't want you to have to think, I have to contact networking. I have to contact this person who usually provides desktop support. Let me email Allison. You have tech.calpoly.edu, and that front door to everything we provide should be where you should find the information. We're here for 3 things. We provide service, we provide help for the services that we support campus with, and we take in new ideas for projects. Those are the 3. If you think about everything an IT organization does, everything maps back to one of those things. Get a service, get help with a service, get something new. So that front door represents the place where you enter the IT organization to get any one of those 3 items. So that's what we're talking about the front door to service and why that was so key to modernizing.
Yeah, and I like the 3. I like your 3s. That I think people always think in 3s. It's just easier, but it makes sense from going to one place to get all of those things, beginning, middle, end. How did COVID accelerate or impact this process? Because it sounds like this started before COVID began. So did it accelerate it? Did it waylay it? How did it impact it?
So always looking forward to what we're trying to accomplish as educators, right? And there's just some things that fit into it. So as we were moving things to AWS, we would stop and ask ourselves, should this go to AWS? Or is this the best today forward, right? So kind of strategic lens to put any app through the process of the move to AWS. And we had an on-prem instance of our learning management system. And I shepherd the governance process too. So my faculty committee, I said, I want to ask you, is what we have the best for today forward, or should we look at something else? Because when we move to Amazon, you are going to have work to do regardless of the noun that we're moving. So do you want to keep doing what we have now, or do we want to look at something else? And of course, it was this simple. They said something else. We went out and purchased and we began to implement. It took a little bit more than that, but actually it was a very smooth kind of transition to our new learning management system. So when COVID came along, I had two things in a small pilot group. Our new learning management system had, maybe on all my hands and toes, I can count the number of faculty that were doing the first quarter, we're in quarters, on the new learning management system was Instructors Canvas. We also had a small beta group on something called the virtual computer labs, the Amazon virtual computer labs. I like to work with people who have a pain point. They're really easy to work with and agreeable to help you figure out ways to resolve their problems. And I had a couple faculty who had stats class and had difficulty distributing the software. You can see where this is starting to go, can't you? Difficulties distributing software. And so at that time we said, could we try the virtual lab for your students to use this? So I had both in very small beta groups. COVID hit, there was the big meeting with cabinet and deans, and the direction went out that if a course required software, the student would have to walk to a lab to use software. They can't come to a lab, you're gonna have to cancel the class. Now, a Polytechnic with pedagogy heavily dependent on software and technology, that would have been budgetarily, it would have very, very impactful. I said, hold on a minute, hold on. I've got this and I've got this, and they're in small beta groups, but I had 2.5 weeks, and I said, I'll just provision 27,000 people into the lab and everybody into Canvas, and we'll start running from there. So we happened to be ready because we were, thinking forward to what we would need overall. We just didn't expect a global pandemic to accelerate the rate of adoption, but it certainly did. And we packaged software and we got it up in the virtual labs for students to be able to access. Quite a bit was there the first day of class, and we kept adding as we went through the quarter. So COVID had huge impacts to this whole initiative. It also started, it shed a little bit more light onto the centralization aspect of campus and why it became important, because we had to act as a campus at that point in time too. Before I had arrived in 2018, there had been some talk with the new CIO, Bill Britton, about centralization, but the focus very much went to Amazon and then modernizing IT. So we weren't really there with centralization yet, and we were doing what we had at our fingertips to be able to support the COVID needs.
So how does centralizing IT, fit into a modern campus? Like where does it sit within the modernization? Because obviously it's not just IT, it's the campus-wide initiative.
If you think about when I arrived, and the legacy of IT, right, is these technical groups that plan, build, run, and each in their function. Well, if you step back, so I, at the point that we were doing all this work for COVID, we were already now restructured into the service organization and DevOps and service management. Step back and look at your campus now and think about where you have technical groups on campus. So now, instead of being network and application development and desktop support and classroom support, and step back on campus and you could see this division, all your colleges, central IT, maybe academic IT, maybe the student affairs, whatever the case may be. And the problem is our students don't go to a college anymore. We have a program where it's a combination of our computer science students and liberal arts. So you can imagine, depending on the level of decentralization or centralization on the campus, what an experience can be for a student who has to, is it a single experience and work seamlessly, or do you have one foot on the boat and one on the dock? So you start seeing that centralization has a bigger role to having a better service. If your customer is the student, who do you serve the student? What are they trying to accomplish? They're trying to learn. And you have a version of some software in the library, you have a version of a software in their department, you have a version of the software maybe in an enterprise laptop, and it's not consistent. Are you serving the student who's trying to learn the best? Right. And so that's where it started looking at centralization, is are we serving students, faculty, and staff, frankly, because faculty are trying to teach with the same software. They get the calls when the student can't successfully complete the project because they happen to be in a lab that doesn't have that toolbox.
Right.
So that you just step back another level and see where that siloed approach kind of starts breaking down when your focus is on who you're trying to serve.
Exactly. And so that modernization isn't just, it's I think a shift in the kind of students that are coming to campus, which kind of leads to my next question, which was, are students and faculty and staff different now? I mean, I would just like to say probably post-pandemic, but just generally, it sounds like there was already a shift occurring before the pandemic, which was why we're looking to a more modern campus. But do you think that your modern approach kind of meets them where they're at today? And did the pandemic force that? Were they already headed in that direction and you guys saw it and were moving to meet them where they were at?
So I think what happened is we kind of work with that. If you build it, they will come, but how fast, right? So there is a change, and it does take time. So I would say building it and they will come accelerated incredibly, like 2.5 weeks. If you were going to teach, you had to use the LMS. There was very little other option other than starting to email out stuff, which become tiresome too. So I would say that it got greater adoption faster than if we had done more traditional methods. And then how is it working for the customer now? So I'm going to show a series of slides here, and it's going to communicate several things. But I'm a data person. Like sometimes I operate from spidey sense, but if I have data, that's what I'd like to go from. So let me show you something, and just talk about what does this data mean in some of this context. So what you see here is September 2021. We're on quarters. We start about mid-quarter or mid-September for a quarter, the fall quarter. And this would represent, in July, we had centralized IT, July 1, the PeopleSoft change went from the night before, overnight, everybody's new supervisor changed. And I said, now is when centralization begins. This does not represent everyone on our ticketing system yet, but it does represent enterprise IT in all of the colleges. Many of the colleges didn't have, they were handling many things, email and things like that. So that was low-hanging fruit. We could get them pulled in quickly, but it does not represent all of campus yet. So can you imagine if we come back to more on person that quarter, and we didn't have our new front door to service with the services we provide in the knowledge base to support them to do the things? Because industry survey shows people really do prefer self-support. If they can find it and do them themselves, that's what they'd like. So that was the goal here, was to enable that. We had 50,000 hits on our website. We had 35,000 hits to our knowledge base. And we had 4,000 tickets to our help desk and to service, tier 1. Now imagine if the knowledge base weren't there. There is no way, if even half of those had been converted into calls or tickets, we would have been buried alive. So we knew we had some good things going on here. We also had we had good information, better than we ever had across all of the campus before. We could see what in support center, the requests by count that we were getting, the top five or six that we were getting. We could see the top 5 places people were going in the service catalog, and that makes a lot of sense. Get your ID, get connected to the networks. And then where were they going to set up their VPN or connect to the Internet of Things secure is our no name, like your printer. Okay, really, your gaming station. That's where those connect to. But it's not robust data. Now let's go. This is actually, so all transparency here. This is July, August, September of this year. And now we do have everybody walking through that front door. They're all using our ERP for IT or Atlassian suite. We've got 88,000 knowledge base views. Even internally, we're using our own data. We will send links to others to help them on what they need to do. We had 13,000 support requests and how many hours we've logged in ticket support. On the other hand, we have Jira as our project. We see how many hours we spent on projects. So we start getting comprehensively the time we're spending on task and what those tasks are for campus. We now have a level of watching to see When are the tickets coming in versus when are they getting resolved? So over the summer, we were doing pretty good. You can see about the time faculty report back under contract till the first month, maybe. There are days they were getting ahead of us. But we could start seeing now set trend lines and start adjusting our staffing. We also have this tier one. That's where when people think of IT, that's the people who come to their offices, are the people they see. And tier two, who supports tier one, sometimes with more advanced things that they don't necessarily know. And tier three is engineering. And so we're really that whole shift right. We want to make sure tier one has the information and training they need to support people. So we can see how many got escalated, that they're 82% of the time we're meeting our SLA on response time, 85% of the time on first resolution. And now user satisfaction rating of 4.92. That is on a scale of 5. I asked a lot of questions here. We actually have double-digit response rates. That's a lot of responses, and that's a high number, but it seems to stand, and they do it consistently each month. So how we structured our support, so we made sure that we had backup in each area and more than one person could help you, but we could maintain our relationships was really key to that number. But that's another webinar. We could talk about, we know where the tickets were being resolved within the organization and how many hours it took to do that. And then this is, my team is struggling with tiered support, but at the end of the day, they're doing it. If you look at it, you see that a lot of our things are being handled at tier one, 15% at the tier two, and less than 2% to engineering. We have a good sense of where we are escalating those things. We now know in terms of continuous improvement where we should be addressing those efforts. These are all things that we could not see previous to this modernization approach. And we certainly could not see that across campus, but this is a campus view of support and how we're helping people.
Thank you.
So the data would say we're getting it done.
I was going to say, data always tells the real story, and it does look like you're getting it done. Those are good numbers. I think people would be happy to see numbers like that at any campus. I did have a question that someone asked, and it said, and when you're talking about your 3 services, where does strategy fit into that?
So your modernization, the effort, service management is totally focused on the services you provide to your campus. So the bucket of what services you do provide, that's getting menu clear, right? tech.calpoly.edu. If you go in, it's a template, it's consistent for each service. It is clear who can use it, how you get support available for it, the availability, what it does, right? Where you get help is linking those knowledge bases in or knowing you can send that ticket or that call in. And then we have an initiative process where you intake, I have a problem and need you to do some work to be able to solve it, like, or something new, a completely new or a gap to fill. So it really, those 3 buckets represent the enabling of those pathways for people to utilize the technical organization.
Okay, thanks. Kind of going back to the satisfaction piece, or have things change. So do you think that that students, faculty, or staff would be as satisfied if COVID hadn't changed their expectations of how software should be delivered?
I think overall, when we started getting our software, we said it was a dumpster fire, right? So let me talk about that a little bit. The packages were good. You downloaded it, they work. Like technically there were some. This is no slight to my staff, but you could talk to my staff too, and they could say, the old system we had was actually a ticketing system, and that was being decommissioned as we were going to our new ERP for IT. It also served as the place you went to download software, and it was very, very difficult to find and use it. And then we were decentralized as a campus, so versioning wasn't always the same. It was a dumpster fire from the perspective of who do we serve and what are they trying to accomplish? We're trying to serve students and they're trying to install software to do their homework. And it just wasn't easy. Didn't always meet their needs, wasn't always consistent. So that's what we had to address in all of this. And so when we came together, when you had to pull lab computers and library computers and all that out of it because you couldn't go to those anymore. And we could launch this one version of GIS that had or CAD with the toolboxes, and MATLAB with toolboxes and things like that. All of a sudden, what's possible and what that means and how much less friction it was, I think it kind of said, we might have something here. So I think it helped in terms of what's possible. Is that fair?
Yeah, and it sounds like really it was a problem before. It was just one that everyone sort of was tolerating, and people were kind of working their way around it, and it sort of highlighted the need to get it fixed.
I can tell you in centralization, I take a very data approach to that too. And so rest assured, nobody was sitting around waiting for things to do. So other duties as assigned can struggle sometimes. And this is a pretty big one. So you would have to have a lot of people and a lot of appropriate administrators across the organization running IT agree that this is what we need to focus and setting time apart to do it, aside from what other things need to be accomplished too. So it's just pretty tough to do that as separate entities.
And someone just asked a question which kind of laid, how do you handle the political challenges with centralization? I think that's
So ProSci, right? It's change management, some approaches to that. This again is a whole, this isn't even a webinar. This is big, but it starts with leadership, right? There had to be buy-in, and we started, the president was interested in this. I said, well, let's collect some data so you can understand the current composition of campus and what that means to you, and do we want to do something about that? So we looked at the hardware and software and platforms we support, the classrooms, the conference rooms, all those kind of things, and went back in with a report about that and said, now we can look at what people do. And so we collected the data on what people do, what things were unique, what were not unique. We were very purposeful and strategic in what we were trying to centralize. If the central IT organization didn't do it, we weren't going to start in that business now. Before we started with campus centralization, I had done all the work to modernize our organization from the technical groups into the service management organization, so that we were getting some practice with that and understanding how it worked and how these processes worked, so that when we centralized and people from campus came into the organization, everybody wasn't trying to learn something new all at the same time. And if I could say, make a recommendation, it's make sure you have that foundation of the largest IT organization first, and then mapping in people to that using data.
Yeah, and I think what I'm hearing too is data was really key, right? It sort of takes that emotional or the power struggle out of it a bit, because you were able to come with hard data, and typically numbers don't lie, we like to say. So I think that sounds like that was kind of one of the more central elements. We got a lot more questions coming in now, but I'm going to ask one that is in our series, and then I'm going to come back because we've got a lot of good questions. So what, when we talk about the software hub that you guys created, what wasn't working and why?
Okay, so I'm going to take the converse here on you. I'll tell you what was working, and then if you reverse that was what wasn't working.
Okay, fair enough. I like that.
A little more positively, right?
Yeah, I like that. I like positive. That's good. Yeah.
So what I had to do, this is actually an infographic that went to the cabinet to talk about an initiative over this past summer about where we said, okay, we're redoing software on campus. We were a central IT organization. Everybody was feeling this pain point, and we made it a massive project this summer to address software. So what we did is we worked on consistent versions and automations to delivering it, right? If you had a state-owned computer, if it's a Mac, Jamf could communicate software to it. If it was a Windows at SCCM, that's what we chose for our organization. We created packages. Those packages were consistent on downloads, what we sent to stations, and what ran in our virtual computer lab. We also have the huge project of Software Hub. We ran a competition to name our Software Hub. And behind Software Hubs is AppsAnywhere. We did our work on requirements of what we needed. We wanted a storefront-like piece of equipment that could allow us to deliver software to campus in whatever method met their needs or the machine they were sitting on, because we can see when it's a state-owned machine versus a personal machine. We'll get into that in a little bit. We refreshed all the physical campus labs as well, so that now we have the software you download, the software in the virtual lab, and the software in computer labs were all matching versions and functions. And so if you flip that, we didn't have consistent versions in software. We didn't have a good place to download software for personal use. Our campus labs could be whatever they were from the last people who ran them, and the virtual lab may be different from all of those. So that was what we did over the summer, is to implement AppsAnywhere and create these packages and get them distributed. I want to talk about this because I said the outcomes here. The first one, in terms of DEI, creates equity and access for all students, right? So imagine the student who can pull out their laptop at their kitchen table, sit down and download the software, log on to the virtual lab, whatever they do, they choose to do to be able to do the homework, versus the student who's got to get on their shoes, walk to campus, find a lab that has the version they need with an open seat. Right? The student who can sit there at their kitchen table, maybe halfway through their homework, or the first one even gets started. Is that an equal experience for each student? And we're going to talk a little bit about the future of programs like this and what I think are some important things that are going to drive success. But it's important that students have access to technology pervasively, anywhere, anytime, any device. And this helps greatly with that. Simplify the software for everyone. We can say that we did accomplish that. Faculty know what they're teaching with, no matter what classroom they get assigned to or lab they go to. The students know that wherever they go, they're going to get the same software. We can remotely, so there's a new version upgrade. It needs to get pushed out over the holiday break, and out it goes, and it's there when you come back. And then again, people love to talk to us. We're nice people. We're great to talk to, but they want to self-serve. So if they can just do it themselves in minutes, that's actually what they prefer, and now they can. So that's how I would look at what our pain points were, how we address them, and what outcomes we were looking for.
And someone asked, do you have equity and access between Windows, Mac, and other home laptop OSs?
So if the software provides it, yes. So we've all had that experience where someone went and got a Mac, and then they bought that stats package that doesn't run on Macintoshes. This doesn't resolve that. Now I can through the virtual lab, and we'll see that a little bit when we get to some of the AppsAnywhere, the software hub for Cal Poly.
So is it safe to say that Software Hub, which is AppsAnywhere, pretty much mirrors your IT as a service objective, and it helped you to centralize the experience for your new students, or your new structure? I'm sorry, for your new structure.
It very much does. Let's go take a look at what the Software Hub looks like at Cal Poly now. When you log in, right now, we implemented over the summer. So September, this fall was our first quarter on AppsAnywhere. And so we're learning a great deal ourselves. We liked it because it is a very similar look and feel to any other app store. When you log on, for example, I grabbed this screenshot, logged in as myself, a staff member on my state-owned Windows machine. So you can see I have available to me 68 packages, and there's 6 unavailable. And I know you're going, why doesn't she have access to the 6? Those are student editions. So I actually have access to the enterprise edition on all those that are listed there. It lists what's available by OS, and then we can categorize that. We do all that and categorize, and you can cross-list them under several categories. It presents to you the way you can access it. Now you see over under ArcGIS Pro, I have a drop down there. I can choose to download that to my local computer, or I can go to the virtual lab and launch it there. If you look up on the upper right-hand corner, there's Adobe Creative Cloud, and that links you. We all work with the Creative Cloud, and you actually go to Adobe and log in there with single sign-on and get the product you have access to. This can link you to open source software. It can link you to anything there, and you will get a drop down. If there's multiple options for you, it tells you what those options are for that software package. We, as the people who administrate this, can actually list the priority order in which those things are shown there. And so this is a similar look and feel that people would see in Google Play or the App Store for Apple or something like that. And it has great flexibility on how we manage this. Now, if I actually went and got another screenshot, I didn't do this, you get the point, and I did it from my personal machine and I logged in, it will look different because it will know, it is integrated with our Active Directory to know who I am. We need to do a version upgrade, and when we do, we're actually going to go towards where we can distribute, that class. We now can hook into Active Directory where we have our class rosters, and we can assign a course access to one piece of software. And only the students who are in that course, when they log in, will see that piece of software and can access it the appropriate way for the software. That is our next step into this. We have to do an upgrade. We just are not there yet. So I would say that it does mirror our service approach, right? It is the one place to go to get software on campus. We have pedagogy specific. We have a School of Agriculture. My favorite example is there's a piece of software called PigChamp, and it's how you're managing pig herds. Now, I've only really ever had demand for that in one place, but they're already going to Software Hub looking for it there. So I know as soon as we enable this from a project perspective, it truly will be highly in demand as the place to go for software, and does mirror that one place to go to get what you need with all the options presented to you there.
Okay, and I have another question for you. Can you remind us of the approximate timeline or length of time this journey to the start of the conversation about creating your software hub through to your recent broad release? Knowing that we had a pandemic in there too.
Let me show you this. Well, am I jumping? Is it okay if I jump ahead?
You can jump ahead. Sure.
Okay.
Yeah.
So as you might guess, I'm interested in data. And this is something that I can get from AppsAnywhere as well. So right here is the user dashboard, right? You can tell my timeline for implementation. So September is when we went live. That's the first big blue bar from the top bottom up. It was February, March, April. It was March, April timeframe when we had it procured and started the implementation process. And so it did go across the summer because it was implementing this as well as a group that were creating packages for software to go here and spread across campus. So it looks like it was, honestly, probably 4 to 6 months, depending on if you start with procurement, for sure, it was 6 months. And then we were live in September. And so you can see how many logins per month, how many unique users. So that falls, there's 10,000 logins, but 2,600 users. And then you can actually see utilization, the software, how many people log into a particular package. If you go, you also can see usage. So this is the top 10 or 11 apps launched, and then launched by operating system. So that kind of goes to you can see Excel by Mac is something that's launched quite a bit. It's just a better experience, or Access and Excel are both. You'll see quite a bit of people launching. If you see for example, it says ldp.calpoly.edu. That's going to be our virtual lab versus where we're directing them. The first one there, the www.solidworks, is the student edition of SolidWorks, and it sends them straight out to the website. So there's clues there as to where they're accessing it as well. So we have good data around the usage. And then finally, this is fun, it's utilization. So you can see it's an average 90 days where the demand is. So nobody's really surprised there. Earlier in the week, more demand than later. Time of day, people finally go to bed about 2 a.m. and then they start in again about 7 a.m. with peak 5 to 7, 8 o'clock. So that can be important, especially if you can manage network traffic. You can see there might be higher demand, and if you're having problems, you might be able to shift around who gets resources at what time. So I think that that's some of the data that helps answer that question.
Okay, so I love your data, because one of my most favorite things about AppsAnywhere is our analytics tool, and I love how you guys are using it. One of my favorite features of our product. So thank you for that. But then I wanted to ask a question. Someone said, how do you deal with limited licenses of a software title where it's not meant for all of campus?
So that would go into, again, if it's not an enterprise license, someone has to define who should have access to it. Another thing that's come from this effort, right, is we did find that we were contracted by software packages in different areas. So when we could see that there were 2 or 3 areas of campus that were paying for the same software, but in separate contracts, we could start bringing that together. And in one instance, that spend allowed us to be able to get an enterprise license and make it available forever, for everyone, not forever, trust me, not forever, for everyone. And so I think that's important, right? I think another equity thing is every student, there is a base of software that every student should have access to by virtue of being a student of that university, right? And the have and have nots and equalizing that to a certain extent is really important, that the specialization in who has access to what software should be the specialization of the content that you're learning. So we did surface that and address that in some contracting to make that more universal. But we haven't done it yet, but with our next upgrade, we are going to get more defined grade control. We're kind of doing this on more single sign-on attributes of who you are on campus. The next upgrade will allow us to use Active Directory attributes. So we can say, okay, this license is only available for, we have some that is in concurrency, so we can offer it, but when it hits that 100th person, the 101st doesn't get in. That's one way. That's still in this equation as well. But otherwise, if it's not concurrency, then they have to be deliberate, purposeful, and who does have access. And of course, we need to have a container that has that group to give them that access.
Yeah. And you kind of touched on something that, going back to the equity of access, is that a lot of times when everyone doesn't have an assigned role and they don't get the right software, or they use a limited free version that doesn't have full, product capabilities, and then they're not able to do their coursework in the way that other students are. So, being able to manage it with an Active Directory, making sure that everyone who's a member of your campus gets the opportunity to use the right tools to do the work that they need to, is really a critical a thing. So, okay, so here's another question. Cal Poly is known as a leader in innovation. Are other schools in the CSU system looking at this solution as well? Have you been talking to any of your peers at other campuses? That was the question.
Yeah, so oftentimes where people come and talk to us is actually about Amazon. That's when I came, I said, okay, we're going to approach constructing our Amazon much like you would a physical data center, because we were working by workloads and putting a thing at a time. And I said, and that's great. We've learned a lot, but we got to stop. You would no more put a server in the dirt and build a physical data center around it. We shouldn't put a virtual server in the cloud and then start building the cloud around it. So we started engaging with a lot of organizations through the work that was done with Amazon, and kind of this more holistic, if you just want to move some workloads, that's a different approach. We were all in and leaving our data center to the extent that things could leave campus. And so we needed to look at a different strategy to do that. We have something called the DX Hub. It's kind of an outreach arm that it shows public sector, not just limited to higher ed, what's possible. And so through the DX Hub, people come and talk to us about what we do. AppsAnywhere and our software hub is relatively new. It's just been this past fall quarter. But as I've talked more with Jennifer, as we've walked through this thing, or I think we talked to a customer at EduCause about this as well that had some questions, got some friends that asked some questions. It's started to be more of a thing people have questions about. And so I would say we talk a lot more about Amazon, but I think this is another Lego of that modernization picture that I, when I jumped at the opportunity to talk today, because it's so one of the biggest services as far as important to what we try to accomplish as an institution, and holistically the need across campus is its access to software. So if there's anything I could share today that can help you, I jumped at the opportunity to be here because stuff is hard.
Yeah. And I mean, obviously, we're hoping that, elevating this conversation outside of Cal Poly and inviting others within the Cal States and obviously across the country will, ignite some new conversations within the Cal States and any other schools out there as well. We did have a question that I can answer. Does AppsAnywhere support automatic updating of managed applications? And the answer is yes, it does. So that makes that really easy. We like to say package once, deliver everywhere. And it's managed by you in terms of version. So you can also use your Active Directory to decide who's going to continue to use an old version, to time updates of software based on what you want to do as a campus and your licensing. We have tons of questions. We are getting close to the end. So I will tell you that all of these really good questions we will be answering on our webpage, so that all of these good questions do get answered. But I did want to ask you, Allison, this is a good one. If you could wave a magic wand, what would you wish for? And where do you think we need to go to meet students in the future?
Great question. And I do actually have a magic wand. It's back in my office at Cal Poly, though. I really do need to bring that home. So let me get my soapbox out here, right? What the future, right? We're dependent on the network. We all felt this with COVID. We have some very remote areas where students were trying to connect. They use something called ranch Wi-Fi. So you can start imagining what the experience can be. We are heavily dependent on the network for many of these things. So we pay close attention to whether it's Washington, D.C. and infrastructure bills, and opportunities to fortify that network, because we all as a country have learned a lot when all of our kids had to go home, whether they're 7 or 20 and had to start learning from home. We understand how important our network infrastructure is. So efforts that continue to connect us as educators and fortify the educational network and to people's homes, very, very important. Mentioned about equity. Computers for all. I actually am a big advocate of could we look at financial aid? It covers tuition and books, but a book is a quarter, maybe 2 quarters. A computer is the entire time you are at the institution. As a matter of fact, books now require you have a computer to run some of the things that support what's in the textbook. So we need to get computers in the hands of students. So that they can go to the virtual lab or they can go to AppsAnywhere and download it locally. It is so crucial to what students do. It's not a nice to have anymore. I would argue it is an essential piece of being successful as a student. I could not imagine going to school without a computer to call my own. And then another one. So if we think of what Amazon did in terms of hardware and accessing hardware, it broke down the walls. It put it in the cloud and allowed you to access it from anywhere and be able to do the work that you needed. What if we could do that with software, right? I can literally tell the minutes of time spent on a piece of software in my virtual lab or AppsAnywhere. What if I have a pre-college program and I want to be able to engage them in the Cal Poly experience before they come to Cal Poly, but they're not in my iPads count. They're not in my Active Directory. Maybe I can make them an affiliate, but it probably violates my licensing. What if software vendors broke down the licensing walls in much the same way Amazon broke down the constraints of a physical data center and allowed me to say, hey, I don't care who you give minutes to. If you say they should have the minutes, here they are. We need that kind of thing because it's not going to be those 4 walls in that building on campus with the computers that we're providing. We're trying to break those physical locational device constraints, licensing constraints, so that we can teach and learn anywhere, anytime, any device, not violate licenses, and be successful in teaching and learning. So those are 3 big areas that I think future inroads will further enable what we're doing here.
Absolutely. And you talk about the internet access. I mean, I think that's one of the biggest barriers. So I will mention that with AppsAnywhere, the cloud paging, the Windows to Windows delivery, if you're using a machine, again, this is an equity piece, I understand that, but if you use a machine that's powerful enough, you can start a session and walk away from the internet and continue to work. And that's true mobility of being able to learn. And that is providing some equity. Again, going back to needing to first provide them an appropriately powered device, right? So how do we figure out that piece? Because it's where everything is moving today. And then someone asked a question, SolidWorks on a Mac. Yes, we can do that. We have the technology. Our Parallel RAS allows you to deliver Windows software to non-Windows devices. So yes, AppsAnywhere can do that. And then I think people probably want to know if your campus isn't already doing what Cal Poly has done, where's a good place to start?
Right. I would attend webinars sometimes, and we've done a lot. I mean, it's a great story for me to tell 5 years later, but as it's a lot, and it can be overwhelming to hear all this. And I don't want to set the expectation that what you need to do is start moving to Amazon, replace your service management desk, reorganize your structure. That is not where you need to start. If you want to, though, it works out really great a couple of years later. But you could make this something for us, a place to distribute software for students. That could be your first focus. We even decentralized, we have points of contacts in each college who we technically usually work with, and you could come together and come to some level of agreement. Surface those pain points first, the first 3 to 5. If we resolve this, maybe we make life easier for 40% of our students. Find those pain points and see if you can come together and resolve those and start working together through a central point. Who do you serve and what are they trying to accomplish? Students, download software. Okay, we all agree then students are our focus. We're going to create this hub where they can come and get it. And we're going to work together to make that software work for them, right? So it will take a level of agreement no matter how you approach it. But start with a subset of people that you want to serve, probably your pain points, because that's how I've gained a lot of successes, saying it was hard and this made it easier. That's a great way to start. And then agree to keep that focus on the service, who you're providing the service, and making sure it is what you're delivering what they're trying to accomplish.
Yeah, that's
that way.
Yeah, I think anytime when you're trying to solve a problem, it's easier to get consensus, but right. I think that's what you're saying there is that, figure out what the pain points are and work from that perspective instead of maybe going with this big overarching idea to start. So
Right. Start small and consensus with that focus, not on what you've always done, but on what does the student need or whatever your customer is.
Absolutely. So I do have one more question. Can using AppsAnywhere, can titles be assigned by course where participants in the course then have access to the necessary software? And the answer is yes. We do that. We do integrate with LMSs so that the software can actually appear right in the LMS itself. And the students can click there, or you can do the software hub method and students go to the one page and access their software through the software hub. But the answer to that is yes.
If I could add one point that I think this is really cool, faculty can go in and curate a list of software for their course and then save it and create a link and put it in Canvas. They can email it to them. They can, however they want to communicate that link. And when the student clicks, they have access to the curated collection of software the faculty would like the student to use for the course. Who do we serve, right? Making it easier.
Yeah, and it serves the faculty too, right? That's kind of a dual purpose thing where it serves not just the students, but the faculty as well.
Absolutely, very much so.
So one last question, because I think a lot of times decisions operate off of, how can we save money or what's the best way to use our money? Someone asked, can you kind of talk about what you think the return on investment is with your integration of the AppsAnywhere product?
So I did not have data comprehensively across the campus. Each college had a level of support in it, divisions did. So I can't tell you X number of hours were spent across the institution packaging and distributing software. I just don't have that data. But I can tell you, we've probably refocused about 3 FTE on other things. So this is part of centralization. It's a giant onion and you're peeling layers away. You have to get old work away from people who used to perform it onto the new group to start performing it. And that's how incrementally you start going from becoming one organization, taking over your new role. And you look different in 1 year, and 3 years, it's a whole different organization. This summer I'm at 2. So we're at the painful point right now in this, but we have really restructured. We have Brad might even be there. He's just super awesome at AppsAnywhere and doing the packaging, and he is doing he is lead on that, and it's freed up others for them to go into their new role. And we could actually work with AppsAnywhere to get packages from them and not package anymore too. So then you could start doing the cost equation of what's the opportunity cost of having this person doing it versus how much does it cost to procure this? Because in COVID, there wasn't really exit program. We had a number of people retire, turnover. It's so hard to find people right now, especially in certain roles, that this is helping us. It would be almost it wouldn't feel like we could actually do all the work we needed to if we hadn't had some of this automation and doing this rather than by area across the enterprise. So we can also look at software. We can look at utilization of software packages. Let's say we need to cut our software budget on campus. Well, your number one used app is SolidWorks, probably not where you would start cutting titles, right? But you can start going down, where are we paying and how much is it being used and is it worth it?
Right.
So that's kind of the insights that I now have, or at least I'm beginning to have, because we've only been on it for about 6 months.
Right. Yep. All that data is going to tell you exactly where you can level set some of your licensing and other things, but already not eliminating positions, but reallocating people within the, current structure to be able to do other important work that you need to get done at the university is really, a huge opportunity. So we're at time, and I think we've gone a little over, and I appreciate you being here today. This was a lot of fun. It always is fun to have a conversation with you. I learned so much. Again, all of the questions that were asked in the chat, we're going to do our level best to answer all of them on our website. And I'm going to pass it back to Jody, who has some more housekeeping issues. Thank you again for all of the attendees. Please feel free to reach out to myself or anyone within AppsAnywhere if you'd like to know more about our product. And thank you again, Allison. It's a pleasure talking to you and working with you and Cal Poly.
Thank you. Thank you, everyone, for joining.
Thank you all so much for joining and making this an interactive session. And thanks for sticking around here for a few extra minutes. Really appreciate your engagement today. On behalf of EDUCAUSE and our presenters today, I just want to thank you all for joining us. Before you sign off, please click on that session evaluation link. We do appreciate your feedback. Your comments are important to us. And just a reminder that today's session has been recorded and will be posted for viewing later today on the website. So feel free to grab that link in the chat and share that with your colleagues who may benefit from this. Really wonderful information. And finally, please join us for our next Industry and Campus webinar on March 1st to hear about supporting digital growth despite funding challenges. On behalf of EDUCAUSE, this is Jody Tracy, and thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you.